So we're going to be looking at the Spanish Civil War today. This is for paper 2, Causes and Effects of 20th Century Wars, which is topic 11. And it was from 1936 to 39, and we're going to be looking at causes, practices, and effects, as well as some historiography. So, as for causes, there were long-term and short-term causes. Let's look at economic first. Land ownership was very concentrated. According to the Oxford Guide, they say half the land in Spain were in the hands of 50,000 individuals, and there was also widespread poverty, and the economy was faltering after World War I because during it they were benefiting because they were neutral, but now that is no longer there. There's also ideological causes. So one thing I can think of is the Catholic Church. Secularism was spreading, but they still had a lot of power, and there was a struggle between people who believed that the church and the state should be split up and the people who didn't believe that. So, yeah, that is connected to political fragmentation. So there were a lot of political beliefs and a lot of fragmentation because of that. And it wasn't just between the left and the right, there was a lot of infighting in the left. For example, there's a belief called anarcho-syndicalism, where they believed in like a decentralized power and more worker control and more power to the unions and the people. And this belief was more popular in industrial and urban areas. So a party that represented this belief was the CNT. And even if we just take communism, there's a lot of like types like Marxism, Stalinism, Trotskyism, as well as like socialists and trade unionists, and they all just disagreed with each other. Another aspect of this is people's opinions on the monarchy, how it should be. So some people thought they should have absolute monarchy. Some people believe they should have a constitutional monarchy because it was changing around that time. People being opposed to or people being for democratic elections and stuff. So there was a lot of fragmentation. This is also connected to regionalism. It's not exactly political fragmentation. It's also similar to the warlord period before the Chinese Civil War. As for historiography, Preston writes that there was an acceptance that political problems could be solved through violence. Basically, they were like, from like a century ago, there were an overthrow of the monarchy or anarchist revolts. The army restores a constitutional monarchy. Yeah, so generally the problems were being solved through violence a lot. Beaver also states that they were becoming enmeshed in an international civil war. So with the Bolshevik Revolution and pretty much everyone fighting within their country, I guess not everyone, but you know what I mean, like it's becoming more of an international phenomenon. Patricia Knight writes that economic problems, social structure with little democratic traditions contributed to the start of the war. They didn't have the tradition of sort of solving problems democratically, so they would essentially just resort to violence, I guess. And there were also other problems like economic and social structure. Okay, there was the Second Republic and their failure. So after the monarchy abdicates and goes into exile in 1931, this center-left coalition government led by this person called Manuel Azaña comes to power. So there's a king, this is a crown, and then this is Azaña's government. And they essentially enacted a lot of legislation like agricultural reforms, labor, and anti-clerical. So they officially split the church and the state, and they started to recognize divorces. However, they weren't extreme enough for the extreme left, and obviously it's going to anger the right. And also because these reforms did change things, but it wasn't enough to solve the widespread poverty that's existing. So really, only the middle class liberals were supporting the Republic, and this led to a rebellion in 1932. And this shows the degree of opposition that this republic faced. So this led to a formation of a right-wing coalition government, and they began to reverse these reforms. This led to more revolts, and in response to this, the Popular Front formed. The Popular Front is basically the tactic to collaborate together, different parties, but different left parties would come together and go against the right, because even though they wanted different things, they knew that they didn't want the right to rule. Some people say that this was learning from the Nazi rise in Germany, because the left in Germany couldn't do this, and so this led to the rise in the Nazi Party, and they wanted to prevent more nationalists from coming into power, right? So that's what they were doing. Azania also recognized the threat of the army, and moved them. So moved generals, including Franco, from their bases of support. Franco is going to lead the nationalists later. And after that, there's going to be an assassination of a right-wing politician. It provided pretext for the generals' uprising. So this led to the conflict between the Republicans, the left, and then there was the army and the nationalists. The Republicans are going to end up losing. Some say that it's partially due to government's hesitation in arming organizations early on in the war. So they did have sufficient manpower but insufficient firepower. This is according to the Oxford Guide. And Preston says that the right was never going to give the left republic a chance. Beaver states that the right's coup, this general's uprising, triggered the general conflict. And he also states that there was a violent suppression and uprising. Preston believes that the war was a fight against fascism, and he focused on Franco's repression.